Hey guys, Grandy Tamias here, and with news being pretty quiet right now on the future of the live-action Transformers universe after Rise of the Beasts, I thought I'd revisit the film and speculate on something interesting. As I predicted in a previous video, all of the Terracons died by the end of the final battle, including their leader Scourge. This leaves a big question. Who will be the main villain of the next Transformers film? Unicron may still be at large, but he's more of a looming threat who still needs others to act on his behalf until he can consume energon-rich worlds. I suspect that this won't reach its conclusion until the end of the new trilogy, so we need a villain to tie us over for Rise of the Beast 2, or whatever the next one will be called. So today, I've come up with a list of candidates. Also, before I begin, I know I already debunked the possibility of Rise of the Beasts and Bumblebee being set in the same continuity as the Michael Bay films in that aforementioned video, but since producer Lorenzo Di Bonaventura has been coy on that matter, probably as not to alienate customers who want to see these movies because they're supposedly prequels, the Bay films did partially influence my choices for this list. I'll start off with the more obvious choices from the Decepticons. Barring a deleted scene involving a character named Transit, the Decepticons went completely unacknowledged in Rise of the Beasts. But even if that scene were canon, it doesn't offer any insight on their current state after most of them were seen on Cybertron during the opening sequence of Bumblebee. We know from the three prominently featured ones in that movie, and Transit, that the Decepticons are more than capable of finding Earth, even if they don't know the Autobots are using it as refuge. So technically, there are a lot of options in that faction alone, but what about their highest-ranking members? With Megatron absent in both films, that very likely leaves Starscream as their leader. And he would actually make perfect sense if, again, hypothetically, this were in the bayverse. The 2007 movie doesn't give any indication of how long Starscream and most of the other Decepticons had been on Earth, so it's possible that he could have been leading their fight with the Autobots on the planet in the years between 1994 and 2007. This could also be an opportunity to include some of those other first movie Decepticons like Blackout, Bone Crusher, Brawl, and Barricade. Gee, what was it with the 2007 movie and Decepticons whose names start with the letter B? With Barricade in particular, maybe they could show off that character's rivalry with Bumblebee again. And you know, I'd actually like this scenario, and I'm sure a lot of other people would too, as nostalgia has been growing for the 2007 film in recent years. Plus, going back to Starscream, he hasn't really been notable in the movies for over a decade. After his death in Dark of the Moon, he wasn't acknowledged in Age of Extinction, was only a severed head in The Last Knight, had that one voiceless cameo in Bumblebee, and was again absent in Rise of the Beasts. Even in the first three films, he wasn't super important. On a brighter note, if Starscream does appear in the new movies, he would have to survive if the filmmakers want to keep continuity with the Bay films, which would have the added benefit of breaking the trend of the main villain dying. Which was my biggest gripe with Scourge, and really the main villains in all of these films. No, she does not count. She was nowhere near as cool as the fallen Sentinel Prime or Lockdown. Though, if they do decide to fully commit to these films being a reboot, then I would want Megatron to be there leading the Decepticons. Just completely throwing away the possibility that he's still frozen in the custody of Sector 7. I mean, he has a new design, which recently got a toy in the Studio series, and he looks great. I might have to pick this one up. Plus, I think it'd be a shame to not have a live-action G1-styled version of Megatron fight the current live-action G1-styled version of Optimus Prime. And with Unicron in the mix, maybe we could see that classic dynamic from the 1986 movie, but without Megatron being turned into Galvatron. I think that'd be too soon. Speaking of the 1986 movie though, that film introduced another character who, like Scourge, was a herald of Unicron and commands a similar level of prestige, Cyclonus. This would be very interesting because Unicron was left without any heralds after his banishment at the end of Rise of the Beasts. Or at least the film never makes that clear. Are there more Terracons besides Scourge, Battletrap, and Nightbird that we just didn't see? I'd have figured Unicron would have sent all that he had if something as important as the Transwarp Key was at stake. Then again, he did have to send reinforcements to Scourge in the final battle. Or perhaps, like what was implied with Scourge, Unicron recruits Cyclonus after they somehow cross paths in that galaxy he's trapped in. If they were to use Cyclonus in the second or third film of this trilogy, I hope that he looks more like his G1 design than Scourge did. Also, if they find a way to make a joke about that Skywarp or bombshell debate, that'd be hilarious. Next on my list are the Predacons. Since I can now call myself a Beast Wars fan, I do agree with the complaint that Rise of the Beasts didn't have enough Beast Wars influence. I don't know if the films are going to end up shifting towards the Unicron trilogy fans, as I predicted in my preconceptions video, but personally I would want the remainder of this trilogy to continue emphasizing the Maximals, unless maybe we get a Beast War spin-off movie similar to Bumblebee, in addition to the main Transformers movies. So why not the Predacons? Rise of the Beasts already confirms that they exist, but we don't know anything about them. Are they led by their own version of Megatron? That'd be a neat way to have a Megatron show up if they're not going to use the Decepticon character. Or if the filmmakers think that it'd be too confusing, maybe they could have a different leader. And who else would be the next best choice for leader of the Predacons than Predaking? Like, maybe they could have a Transformers Prime-styled version of Predaking where he's a dragon, but he commands a Beast War-styled faction of Predacons, which are other animals. As a Prime fan, I think that'd be so cool, and maybe like with Ape Link from the Maximals, they could tap into other Predacon characters from the toy line who weren't in the cartoon. Aside from those, I can't think of many other Transformers characters or groups of characters who are significantly popular enough to command the status of main villain. Then again, most casual fans, including me, had never heard of the Fallen before the movie where he literally got his name in the title. And while Sentinel Prime and Lockdown did already exist in Transformers Animated, no one expected that they'd be main villains in the movies. Although that does remind me, maybe they could take another crack at Lockdown. Who's to say that Age of Extinction was his first time on Earth? In fact, in Age of Extinction, both Optimus Prime and Ratchet do have prior knowledge of Lockdown, so maybe a future film could show the origin of that. He'd also have to survive to keep continuity with the Bay films, and it could be an opportunity to give him a live-action look like his animated self where he was a muscle car. Plus, I really enjoyed Mark Ryan's voice for the character, so I'd love it if they brought him back. I could also see the filmmakers reaching for more obscure characters like Geaxus. I can't remember for certain, but I might have had his Generations toy from like a decade ago, and I know he got a figure recently in the Legacy toy line. I don't know much about him other than that he was the leader of the Generation 2 Decepticons, which is why I chose him for this list. Also, Shockwave in the G1 Marvel comics did take over as Decepticon leader at times, even fighting Megatron for it. Come to think of it, just like with Starscream in 2007, Dark of the Moon never shows Shockwave coming to Earth or makes indication of when he did. Yes, I know in the Dark of the Moon video game he was frozen by the Russians, but they could completely throw that out. The games aren't necessarily canon to the movies. And I think Shockwave would make a great stand-in for main antagonist, as he is my favorite G1 Decepticon. And that's all I have for my list. I'm pretty confident that at least one of these characters will appear in one or both of the next two films. Or who knows, maybe like with Shatter, they could make a new character up. Okay, I know she's not completely original, like how her head was based on G1 Nightbird, which is kind of funny now that we got an actual Nightbird in the movies. I digress. Anyway, feel free to let me know in the comments, who would you want to be the main villain in a future live-action Transformers film? I'm also open to suggestions for more video topics, especially on the movies, but I can also talk about the shows like Transformers Prime and G1. And if you haven't already, check out my full review of Rise of the Beasts. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed, have a nice day, and thank you for your time.